probably heard me mention him a lot. This is on Why You Should Know Richard Florida. Maybe you're tired of hearing the name until people know who he is on this channel, and outside I'm going to keep doing this video on him. This will be the most in-depth video though. You'll hear me mention him here and there, but this will be the most in-depth video. Remember, people, let's say people age between, let's say people 30 and up, maybe 20, 27, 28 and up. And growing up, if you've seen like an older cousin or an older sibling and they graduated college and they remember how proud your parents was, or if you were the first person to graduate high school in your family, first person to graduate college, and it was a big deal. If you come from a minority or especially a black family, it was a big deal to graduate college, and for some it was a big deal to graduate high school. And that was it. That was like the benchmark. That was, I graduated, everything's good, I can secure my spot in the middle class, and I'll have a nice picket fence and live the American dream and have a family and, you know, this and that. But those days are over. And that's why I'm doing this video, because if you've seen the gentrification videos, you'll know who Richard Florida is for the most part. And you'll know his he's the #1 influential urban theorist in the world. And I don't know, I'll just read a small quote. When he visited Green Bay, an organizer described him at the Northeast Wisconsin Creative Future event as an invigorating and eye-opening experience. Our lives have been changed for the better. You have brought us insights and language which will serve us, as well as explore new directions for successful economic and community development. He's been to Dublin, London, Singapore, Memphis, Amsterdam, Rhode Island, Green, all over the country, Austin. So, I don't want to keep beating on that, but this, you have, just because you haven't heard him being spoken of in the conscious community doesn't mean he's not a big deal. You know what I mean? Just because people aren't doing lectures on him or speaking on him doesn't mean your local politicians aren't listening to him. And that's why I want to do this video, because politicians can only do so much work. There's so many issues, and they have to go to meetings, they have to go to council meetings and meet with people, go through the neighborhood. Even if they're not doing nothing, they gotta look busy. You know what I mean? And people like Richard Florida, it saves them a lot of work, because if you might hear your politician go or councilman go, you know, I went to this city and this worked and I want to bring it here. And that's because, if it works one place, we tend to think it can work everywhere, and that's not really true. And in this case, Richard Florida, again, just to give people a quick recap, the creative class, he felt that the creativity market, basically arts, entertainment, somewhat computers, but mostly arts and entertainment, music, different things like that, that can be the driving force to stimulate and be the backbone of a society and an economy. And it's not a stable market, it's not a stable field. You can't do that. And he did this 2004 to 2006 or whatever, and basically now 2017 he says it's not going to work. And he says, and quote, basically he's saying that, okay, the middle class in this country has declined, but more importantly to me, the middle class neighborhoods, those platforms for the American dream, have been decimated. So this is what he said in an interview with the NPR. But And people were saying, if you see the 3 videos I put out on gentrification, the territorial stigmatization, the bike lanes, and the rise of the creative class, and they've been saying this, the people that criticize him, that it was going to gentrify areas, it was going to split up the middle class, and lo and behold, this is what it's done. So the reason I'm doing this is because I'm not hearing people speak on it, and a lot of people are graduating now. A lot of people are graduating college, high school this time of year, and the whole we get a degree and that's it. You gotta come back, because there's a big article in the Huffington Post that the middle class blacks are leaving and forgetting about their lower class counterparts. And that's kind of a thing too, because if this keeps up, the middle class blacks will find themselves right back into the hood or the lower class. And it's already, I'll post a link, the gap between the rich and the poor is a 30-year increase, a 30-year high. It's the highest it's been in 30 years between the rich and the poor. Some say it's the highest it's ever been. So when the creative class are getting these federal funding, the federal money, that's money that is supposed to be going to creating or solving problems in the inner city, in real communities. The creative class, it can't sustain a family. It can't really, you know what I mean? Like, you can't really make money and raise a family of thousands of people, like a Ford industry or a car industry or different things like that. So an article from the Detroit Free Press, as a result, Richard Florida told 300 listeners at the annual meeting of the Economic Development Entity Ann Arbor Spark they need to deal ever more urgently with the crisis of gentrification, affordability, segregation, and inequality. But this is what he wasn't preaching: gentrification, segregation, and inequality, but his ideologies that a lot of, because if you remember, I talked about the Cool City initiatives. That's in the Creative City class. That was a thing that hundreds of neighborhoods in Michigan picked up, and now it's causing gentrification. Florida says, it dawned on me that this urban revival, this knowledge economy, was the source of the divide itself. So he's telling you, the knowledge economy, and that's another word for the creative class. He's telling you that it was the source. So he's admitting that he caused this. Unless we heal that divide, he didn't cause it, but he's admitting his role in a way. Unless we heal that divide, we cannot go further. We have gone as far as we can building a self-knowledge based economy. The solution now, he said, is to invest in things that improve and empower the service and working class, the blue-collar workers. Those things include more affordable rental housing in cities, better public, well, we want more ownership of houses. But my thing is, number one, if you're graduating college or school or high school, don't forget to come back and do what you can for the lower class, for the middle class, even middle class blacks, and focus on establishing stable economies in your cities, in your communities, affordable housing, different things like that, because you have to know who's influencing your politicians, who's influencing your council people. How do you think they come up with the stuff that they come up with? They're not listening to us. They're not saying, oh, you guys want this done? Okay, it's done. You know what I mean? Like, we have to march and protest, and for how many years for things to get done? But if they think something is working, if there's a trend, because because this is a trend. If there's a trend, then they're more than likely going to jump on it and put it on their agenda. So you have to, because I go to council meetings, I go to consent decree meetings and different things, and as much as we hate on the old people in the civil rights movement, they're the only ones in these meetings. Even in different cities, I'm sure, like, we need more young people at these meetings, more young people holding politicians and council people accountable. Like, oh, do you know who Richard Florida is? And what do you think about, like, ask your council person about Richard Florida. What do you think of his agendas? If there's a lack of employment in your community, but there's an art gallery being built or something that symbolizes gentrification, and ask them, well, why is this being done or why is this not being done? And what can you do about it? You know what I mean? We need to see what industries are up and coming, because the food prep industry and food service and different things, I think they're saying those are the most open jobs, basically. But something long-standing and that can stimulate an economy that is stable. It might not attract a whole lot of people, but you can say, well, this area, because this is what happens. The money doesn't circulate back into the economy and the local economy. So if you have a creative class, let's say it's people just selling art. People are going to come from out of town, going to come from different communities. And let's say it's 5 people doing art, and that's just 5 people. Are those 5 people feeding a family with selling the art, or 20 people working in a factory producing something? They're able to feed their families. They're able to spend that money within the community and other communities. You see what I mean? So it's I don't know why this isn't being talked about more, but for us as black people to be to be at the bottom of this, feeling it, we're not really discussing it. I know it's not exciting. It's not exciting, and it's not the most exciting thing, but it's the most relevant thing. It's more of a relevant impact than anything Donald Trump is doing. His budget cuts, they're probably not going to get passed anyway. So, but this stuff was happening before Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying? Like, minimum wage, to focus on that. How are people going to respond to minimum wage? What's going to go up? Are more people going to get laid off? These are issues that they're not the most exciting, but we can't focus on. I'm not going to focus on the most exciting. I'm going to focus on what is the most relevant to me. And I feel this issue, finding out what influences your politicians, your council people. What can you do about it? How can you influence them? Who do you need to gather up? What group of people do you need? What are the needs of your community? Is it environmental issues? Is it crime? Is it unemployment? And then go from there. Is it housing? Is it police brutality? I mean, we're all going to have those issues, but some issues are going to be more prevalent than others. But this is definitely in there, gentrification, or, the creative class. Even if your city is not being, let's say your neighborhood is not being gentrified, but your mayor, there's another neighborhood in your city that wants to be gentrified, or your mayor has an agenda for the creative class, and he wants to attract bike lanes. He wants to attract, tourism. He wants to rely on an unstable economy. Because it doesn't just have to be, well, I'm not getting gentrified. It can be, well, we can't, are we trying to depend on a creative industry that is not stable? Because like I said, you can't determine who the next, that Basquiat painting just went for $110 million, but how long, what is that going to do? And how many there's only one Basquiat, there's only one, you can't predict. And even that one person, the impact is not significant enough to really do anything. So I think we need to change our priorities and basically focus on creating a stable economy within our neighborhoods, and basically, because when you get your degree, look at how many people with degrees are not working in their field and different things like that. That is not the definition of success. The definition of success, we can only go as high as we go, as far as helping those and then helping ourselves, and keep the cycle going like that. And I think just a lot of work that needs to be done, and we have to shift. We have to shift the topic to, why do we know more about Donald Trump than our mayor or our politicians? We have to ask ourselves that, and what can we do about it?